Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel, Augusto Argandoña Fine Arts. Anytime in this narrated tutorial, you can click on the subscribe button to subscribe to my channel. And if you should want to learn about my virtual classes or want to see my paintings, you can do so on my website at aafinearts.com. This tutorial is about how to paint image in watercolors. This particular image is of in the Verde Valley in Arizona. It's a really beautiful area. Some areas of Arizona are pretty much desert-like with cactus and very arid areas. But also there are some other areas, especially around Sedona, the Verde Valley, Cottonwood, and Flagstaff, that are really, really beautiful areas. Very beautiful, very almost lush green areas, especially at the Verde Valley, around the Verde River. Very beautiful areas. And in some areas, the colors are just striking. The greens, the varieties of warms and cool greens, very striking in contrast with some of the red rocks that one can see in some of those areas. Anyway, so again, this is at Verde Valley in Arizona, and I was there at Sedona a couple times in the past. And I really enjoyed that area, and I took a lot of photographs, and so I thought at some point in time I'm going to paint these images, so this is one of those times. So without much ado, I'm going to go ahead and start with the fun part of this tutorial, and that is the painting part. I'm going to get clean up this. There's some residues of the pencil there. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the sky. I paint on 140-pound cold press bright white watercolor paper, and I use primarily, well, I have brushes that are flat and brushes that are round, but for the most part I'm more comfortable using my flat brushes. I know some artists paint the whole thing, the whole image with the one round brush, but I can do the whole image with one flat brush. That may not be the case in this with this painting, but that's what I've been known to do. Sometimes paint the whole image with this brush. It's a Winsor & Newton flat brush. Beautiful brush. So I added some water to the sky area. I'm going to mix a little bit of manganese blue with the cobalt blue. Mostly the cobalt blue. And I'm going to come over here and add on that wet paper, I'm going to add a little bit of this blue. And I'm going to leave some white areas with the paper to show clouds. Like that. I'm going to bring a little bit more of the cobalt blue by itself. There will be some contrast with the red rocks here. So that's pretty much it for the sky. I'm going to let that dry. In the meantime, I'm going to add a little bit of water to this portion of the river at Verde Valley. Verde Valley, Arizona. Really beautiful area. Very, very beautiful area. I was there, both times I was there twice I was there in the middle of the summer. in July. One time in June, the other time in July. And it wasn't really that hot. Well, for some people, I guess it was hot. 105, 110 degrees. But it was dry, really dry. I'm not used to that. I'm used to the heat, but I'm not used to the dry weather. You know, I live in Florida, so heat is not, it doesn't bother me at all, but the dry weather does. So now I'm going to bring in some more cobalt blue, and I'm going to put some of that cobalt blue here on that wet paper again, like that. And I'm going to bring it over here a little lighter to this area. A little bit more of the cobalt blue, especially over here. And I'm going to bring them with quick strokes like that. A little lighter into this area. This is going to dry much lighter, so anticipating that, I'm going to bring in some ultramarine blue into that blue area too, combined with cobalt blue right over here. Right like that. And I'm going to bring a little bit of that over here too. But mostly, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some manganese blue also. See all those areas over here where the paper was wet and I laid the colors for the sky. It creates a kind of a crispy, not crispy, but misty type clouds. I'm going to do that there. Okay, that's enough. I'm going to lighten this up a little bit. There, okay, I'm going to let that dry. But before it dries, this area, although it looks very dark now, it's going to dry much lighter. So I'm going to increase the value of that blue area, because there's going to be some shade areas here from trees over here on the right hand side. So I'm going to increase the value of this blue here. And this area is going to be kind of brownish. So, okay, that's enough. I'm going to let that dry. Now, while that's drying, I'm going to, let me see, my sky is still kind of damp, so I'm going to have to be careful with that area. So, while that's drying, I'm going to get some yellow ochre. And on dry paper this time, I'm going to bring some of that yellow ochre into this area. This is the sunny side, the sky, the sunlight's coming from the right hand side. Yellow ochre there. Then I'm going to bring in some burnt sienna. Here's some of the red rocks in this area. Yeah. I wouldn't say red rocks, but kind of reddish type ground. That leaves a few areas of white there. There's some rocks over here too, but for those areas I'm going to bring in a little bit more of yellow ochre, but this time I'm going to bring the yellow ochre with brown matter. It makes a color similar to the burnt sienna, but it's not quite like the burnt sienna. Like that. Has a little bit more of a reddish tone. Now I'm going to increase the brown matter with the yellow ochre and come over here and do that like that. Yeah, that's big, that's almost dry now. So I can do that. I'm gonna add a little bit more water to my brush and bring some of those colors over here, but pretty light for this distant mountain. And the same here too. Blend those colors in. And while this is still kind of damp, I'm going to change brushes to this beautiful brush that I have here. It's a Princeton brush. Then I'm going to pick up some permanent sub-green mixed with the blues that are in my palette already. And I'm going to start laying in some of the colors for the vegetation in this area. I'm also going to add a touch of undersea green to that. Like that. I think I'm going to change brushes. I'm going to use my other round brush. I'm going to add a little bit of aureolin yellow to that green. There we go. Yeah, that's better. There's some vegetation over here. Like that. I'm going to bring a little bit more of the aureolin yellow with the undersea green and a touch of the permanent sub-green mixed there. There we are. Some nice trees there. That area. There, like that. Now I'm also going to bring in some ultramarine blue right into that mixture for some of the cooler colors. And all at the same time, I'm going to add probably some burnt umber. Yeah, burnt umber mixed with that green. There, that's the right value that I wanted. While this paper is kind of damp, so it's a wet and to wet technique. I'm going to bring some sepia too. I think I'm going to change from the burnt umber to the sepia. That would be better. Yeah, that's right. Especially in these lower areas where the shadow sides. There we are. Shadow side of those trees. I'm going to also add a little bit more water over here because I want some softness in that area. And some ultramarine blue, soft and cool colors in this area here. There, that's what I wanted to do, some cool colors, some cool greens there. Some of the vegetation there is really beautiful, but the greens are kind of cool. There, that's the color I wanted there. I'm going to leave some of these areas white for now. And I'm going to increase the value of these dark areas over here. Like that. There. Some over here too. like that. And while that is still kind of damp, I'm going to take my pocket knife and create some of the trunks and branches of some of these trees, like that. Not too many, especially over here, you will not see much of that, but over here you would. There. All right. So now, over here, I'm going to add a little bit of water to this area, right by the edge of the water, the river. I'm bringing some of the water over here, kind of mix it into that greenery there. There. I'm going to mix some aureolin yellow with that green that I see in my palette and bring some of those colors over here. There's some very tall grasses and other type of vegetation. I bled some into this area. That's all right. Don't worry about that. A little bit more aureolin. This time I'm going to bring in some raw sienna with the permanent sub-green. With really bright grasses over here. Very tall grasses. Right now this is the base color. A little bit more raw sienna. Come over here. Add some of those colors there like that. A little bit more of the raw sienna with the aureolin yellow. But this time I'm going to add some ultramarine blue to that. Get an entirely different type of green here. Like that. Okay. Now, I'm going to go back to the undersea green with the sepia and the permanent sub-green and start doing some of these grasses. Darken some of these areas, especially close to the water. Like that. And from that, we're going to do some of the tall grasses. Like that. Darker areas close to the water. While the paper is still damp. And then do the tall grasses. Just an indication of these tall grasses like this, especially over here. But down here where the paper is still damp, I'm going to just add some darker colors. I'm going to go back to the burnt umber this time. Warm up that green a little bit. Especially over here. There we are. There we are. And get some sepia, the undersea green, the permanent sub-green, and come over here and darken some of these other areas and give a little bit of a texture to some of these trees. There, like that. Those areas. Not too much, but a little bit of texture is good there. And come back over here and add some ultramarine. And there's some dark greens over here, like that. There. Let's have some of that darker greens over here on the base. The base of these grasses. And that's pretty much it for that. I'm going to increase the value of that greenery over here, right close to the rocks. With a little bit of texture in there. All right, so now take my brush, pick up my flat brush again. This time I'm going to, I have some of the reddish tone here, but I'm going to bring in some mineral violet into this color and do this distant hills. Like that. Lighter in color because of the distance. Like that. I'll clean my brush and then bring some cobalt blue, a light wash of cobalt blue over here. Cobalt blue has a beautiful tendency of showing distance, and it's absolutely gorgeous. See what's happening here? That's what happens when you mix the colors on the paper. There we are. And then on top of that, I'm going to bring in some purple, a violet color. There we are. That's really nice. Really beautiful, beautiful colors. Showing the distant hills there like that. And last color that I'm gonna do, notice that I'm mixing these colors on the paper, not on the palette. The last color is this rose madder. There's just a touch of that rose madder. There, beautiful. While I have that color, I'm gonna add some of that color over here too. There we go. And then I go back to my nice Princeton brush and we'll pick up a little bit more of the, now I think this time I'm going to pick up some brown matter and some burnt umber and do these rocks over here. Just a little bit of a shape to some of those rocks. Like that. And I'm also going to pick up a little bit of mineral violet and give those rocks a little bit more of a shape, picking up the shadow color of the rocks. Like that. A little bit more of the mineral violet. With this time I'm going to pick up some sepia, mix it there, do some of the darker areas. the rocks. There we are. There. And before that dries completely, I'm going to pick up some permanent sub-green and some ultramarine blue. And there's a different type of greenery above here. I'll touch a little bit of these bushes. There, like that. Barely touch the paper. It's entirely different type of greenery than that's over here. Like that. Same thing over here, some of that different type of greenery. There, like that. And we'll get some of the brown matter with the mineral violet and a little bit of the cobalt blue. And come over here and give a little bit more definition to these rocks and this lower area. And like that. Lastly, for those rocks, I'm going to bring in some clean yellow ochre. And I come over here and add a little bit of warming of some of these areas. There we are, that's what we're talking about. Okay. There. All right. So now, I'm going to pick up some of the permanent sub-green, a little bit of sepia, and the ultramarine blue. And this area is kind of in the shade. Over here. A little bit of a grassy area in the shade here. Pick up some sepia also, really dark and grassy, but a lot of dark areas. Because of the shadow side of this river. There's a little bit of a indentation here too, like that. Okay, and there's some tall grasses there too. But what I'm going to do there is, to those tall grasses, I'm going to wet my flat brush, remove the moisture like this, separate the bristles like that, and from there, holding the brush this way, I'm going to do these grasses. Picking up a little bit of color. There. A little bit more of the green. This time with some Payne's gray because it's in the shade. And these grasses. There, see? There's some of these grasses sticking out of the water too. Like that. Really nice. Clean my brush. Now I'm going to darken some of the trees that are there. I'm going to use some sepia, permanent sub-green, and Payne's gray this time. And almost with a dry brush, I'm going to darken some of these trees to create some contrast here. And also some texture. Same thing over here. And here. Getting contrast against the mountains in the distance and contrast against the lower greens, lighter greens, like that. I'm gonna do some of that here too. Create some contrast in this area. Contrast some texture for this greenery. There we are. And this for these grasses. Yeah, like that. Now it looks much better. Okay. Now, my paper is dry in this area, so with a damp brush, I'm gonna soften some of this area, so close to the water. Removing some of the color, but it's kind of softening the edges of some of those that lighter color, lighter green vegetation. There, like that. I'm gonna do the same thing over here. I already did some of that there, but I'm gonna do this over here, creating a really nice contrast with the vegetation that's behind. There, like that. See? Same thing over here. Notice how I'm using the brush. Usually you paint this way, but I'm painting upwards like that. I'm removing color upwards and creating those soft, really beautiful soft areas. And I'm gonna do that over here too. And this is fine there, I'm gonna leave it. But that greenery over there, I'm gonna darken a little bit more. There, like that. I'm gonna leave the rest of the way they are, because they are a little further from this area. So now, well, that's done. This area is dry. I'm going to, this area is still kind of damp. There's some bushes over here, so I'm gonna use the Andes green, almost with a dry brush, and the paint's gray. And there's some bushes over here too. Create that contrast against these lighter areas. That's what I wanted to soften and lighten these areas. There's some low bushes over here that are in the shade. It's amazing what you can do with your finger alone. There, like that. There. There we are. That's good. Okay, now I'm gonna clean that brush. I'm gonna pick up back to my flat brush. Clean it really good, because I need some clean water. And come over here and re-wet this area. But don't touch the greens. Re-wet this entire area. And coming down over here too, and without disturbing some of those greens, but bring that water all the way. You can look at it at an angle to see if you cover everything. That's the best way to check. And when you do this, don't press the brush too much. You don't want to remove color. You just want to wet the paper. So now, this area is blue because of the reflection from the sky, but the river, the water in the river is actually kind of muddy. So I'm gonna use some burnt umber and a touch of sepia. And come over here and do this on that white paper. Blend it right onto this muddy color, right onto the blue. I'm gonna bring a little bit more of the sepia. Like that. Paper is beginning to dry here already. So I'm gonna leave that alone. Add a little bit more clean water to that area. I'm gonna bring a little bit more, a little bit of the undersea green with the sepia. Add some, change the colors over here. This muddy river. I'm gonna bring in some cobalt blue also. Connect some of these blues. There, like that. There. Okay. A little bit more of the burnt umber with that muddy, barely touching the paper here. Don't press the brush. Barely touching the paper. And now I'm going to let that dry. I think I'm going to get some of this. I'm going to add a little bit more water here. This is drying very fast. And I'm going to bring in some of this greenish brown over here too, for these reflections from all this vegetation. There. A little bit more of the green. Same thing over here. There, I'm gonna let that dry. While that is drying, I'm gonna go back with my round brush and soften some of this a little bit more. Pick up some more color and without touching the water. At this point, don't touch the water because the paper is saturated, it's wet, and the color that I put on the paper is wet also. So don't touch the water. There. I'm gonna leave that alone. I'm gonna let that dry. And the painting is pretty much it for now. I'm gonna bring in some more Payne's Gray with the dry brush. I'm sorry, I'm not brown matte, rather. A little bit of ultramarine blue. And I'm gonna darken some of these rocks. I'm gonna do some of these areas. Like that. Just a slight indications of that. Same thing over here. I'll darken some of these areas. There. Also, I'm going to take a smaller flat brush, and I'm going to remove some of the pigments in some of these areas to lighten up, because some of these areas are getting sunlight too. So I'm going to lighten up this, removing pigment with a flat brush. There, that's what I wanted to do. Okay. I'm going to let this dry completely. And in fact, maybe I can use the hair dryer, but you see, that area is almost dry. So what I'm gonna do there is I'm gonna get the small round brush, pick up some on the sea green, some of the Payne's gray, quite a bit of the Payne's gray actually, and do some of these tall grasses over here coming out of the water. And then tall grasses coming out of that grassy area. There. Like that. I'm going to do it the other way with a flat brush. Those grasses coming out of that area there. And all of these grasses that are in the shade. There, like that. And those grasses that are coming out of the water are projecting a reflection. So do a little bit of that. There, like that. There we are. And this, yeah, it's almost dry. So I'm gonna get my smaller flat brush and pick up some of the color from here. Oh yeah, there we are. There, that's nice. That's really nice. See, all of this is blended right into the blue, really beautifully. And yeah, it's almost dry. So right now, so what I'm gonna do there is at this edge where the grasses meet the water, with a dry brush, I'm gonna pick up some more of the green and the Payne's gray, and separating the bristles like this. I'm gonna do the lower portion of those from the water up, of those grasses. Like that. See? There. There's those tall grasses. Very, very nice grassy areas there. I don't know what the name of this grass, but it's really very nice. It's very, very tall. That probably 4 or 5 feet easily. Right at the edge. There. Okay. And the painting is pretty much done. I will. There are some lighter color shoots at the bottom of those grasses. So for that, I'm gonna see if I can do this. I'm gonna just leave it alone. That's enough. So I'm gonna remove this tape, and I'm gonna bring a dark board, and you will see how this looks like. There we are. I'm gonna remove this tape. This is I would think this is the Verde River. Well, you know, it's natural. The Verde River at Verde Valley, Arizona. This is, the water area is not quite dry here, so I'm not gonna touch the paper. But you get an idea of what this looks like. I'm gonna minimize it. And there you are. Verde River at Verde Valley, Arizona. A beautiful area. This dry. I'm gonna wait for it to dry before I sign my name to it. But all these rocks, they have a lot of texture and variations of the colors. The greenery is a very, very peculiar type of green, very different than the greens that we have here in Florida. Of course, we have tropical light, so it makes the greens much brighter. But these greens are very nice too. And all these tall grasses and very soft edges of the vegetation here, in contrast with the dark trees there, some of these dark bushes and the grasses in this shady area. And the distant hills. I used a little bit of brown matter, I used a little bit of a cobalt blue, a little bit of mineral violet, and the last one was rose matter, just to give that very rosy look, everything thrown into the distance. And that's the way it looks in Arizona. I hope you enjoyed this, watching this tutorial. And please visit my website at aafinearts.com. There you will see information about my virtual classes and a selection of my paintings and prints. Thank you again. Until next time.